Mexico in turmoil as El Mencho boldly announces war against the U.S. El Chapo isn't lagging, as the two cartels actively work towards forging an alliance. How did it escalate to this? Stay tuned to find out. An unlikely alliance. As Donald Trump settled into his second term as U.S. president, Mexican drug lord Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, also known as El Mencho, reportedly called an emergency meeting to prepare his cartel, the Jalisco Nueva Generacion Cartel, CJNG, to confront the administration. This followed Trump's executive order that designated drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, a measure intended to bolster his immigration policies. While conservatives praised the move, it sparked backlash, with experts warning of potential consequences. These warnings materialized as cartels engaged in cross-border skirmishes with U.S. forces, allegedly retaliating against the intensified border crackdown. Mexican drug cartels, particularly CJN El Mencho, reportedly prepared for Donald Trump's return to the White House by acquiring powerful weapons, including RPG missile launchers priced at $60,000 each. Journalist Anabel Hernandez revealed on her podcast Narcosistema that El Mencho was preparing to confront Trump's designation of drug cartels as terrorist organizations. She mentioned that the CJN was the fastest to arm itself in response to this policy shift. El Mencho allegedly planned a special meeting with regional bosses to instruct them on responding to possible U.S. law enforcement actions. Despite claiming arrangements with the Mexican government, he did not dismiss the likelihood of covert U.S. operations. High-tech bunkers were reportedly built between Jalisco and Colima to protect against airstrikes, reflecting El Mencho's concern for his safety. The cartel also increased surveillance of airports, cities, and U.S. consulates to monitor for suspicious American activity. In addition, El Mencho planned to continue drug shipments to the U.S., lowering prices to boost consumption and maximize profits through higher volumes. These actions highlighted the CJN's proactive measures and adaptability under heightened scrutiny. Prior to these recent developments, Los Chapitos reportedly contacted El Mencho to discuss a potential alliance. This was driven by the ongoing turf war between Los Chapitos and La Maíza for control of the Sinaloa cartel, which had severely impacted both factions since the conflict began in late 2024. In a bid for advantage, Los Chapitos, led by Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's sons, sought collaboration with their longtime rivals, the CJN. According to journalist Luis Chaparro, this proposed alliance had been under negotiation for months, even before Los Chapitos officially declared war on La Maíza on September 9, 2024. During an alleged meeting in Zapopan, Jalisco, Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar, son of El Chapo, met with a close CJN associate to broker a deal. Reportedly, Los Chapitos offered territories along the U.S.-Mexico border in exchange for firearms and soldiers to combat Los Mayos. They even discussed creating a logo to symbolize their partnership. However, despite agreeing to a truce and informal arrangements, there has been no evidence of collaboration between the two factions. No joint operations have occurred in Sinaloa, and CJN forces have not been observed in the region. As of now, territories remain unchanged, and the alliance appears stalled with no concrete developments. The potential alliance between the CJN and Los Chapitos appeared contradictory, considering the history of conflict between their leaders, which extended to their families. On August 15, 2016, the CJN kidnapped the son of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the imprisoned leader of the Sinaloa cartel. Authorities confirmed that the act likely represented a move by El Mencho to challenge El Chapo's dominance, underscoring the ongoing rivalry between the two powerful cartels. The CJN, which El Mencho founded in 2010 from remnants of the Milenio cartel, quickly established itself as one of Mexico's most violent criminal organizations. By 2016, the group operated in at least 8 Mexican states, including Mexico City, and became notorious for violent acts. In 2015, it orchestrated a deadly attack that killed 15 police officers and even shot down a military helicopter with a rocket-propelled grenade. Reports of tensions between the CJN and the Sinaloa cartel had surfaced as early as 2015, and El Chapo's recapture in January 2016 exposed vulnerabilities in his cartel. Although El Chapo played a central role in the Sinaloa cartel, the organization functioned as a federation rather than a strict hierarchy. Other influential figures, such as Ismael El Mayo Zambada, remained key players in the cartel. This decentralized structure allowed the Sinaloa cartel to maintain its drug operations with minimal disruption, extradition, even following El Chapo's earlier arrest in 2014. While the kidnapping of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's son made headlines in Mexico, El Chapo also drew attention when he was granted a request to return to the maximum security prison Altiplano in 2016. Having escaped from Altiplano in 2015, he had initially been placed there after his recapture in January, but by May, he was transferred to a prison in Ciudad Juarez. During this time, with El Chapo behind bars and awaiting extradition to the United States, a major fracture began to emerge within the Sinaloa cartel. Despite leaving a letter passing leadership of his faction to Damaso Lopez Núñez, alias El Leak, in what seemed an attempt to protect his sons, Los Chapitos, El Chapo's sons, rejected this directive, igniting a violent power struggle for control of the cartel. The conflict escalated on August 15, 2016, during a birthday celebration for El Chapo's eldest son, Ivan Archibaldo Guzman, at a restaurant in Jalisco. While Ivan and his brothers awaited guests with minimal security, armed men attacked and kidnapped them. Though the ordeal lasted only a few hours, it made national news and intensified speculation about those responsible. A source in Sinaloa revealed that both Alfredo and Ivan Guzman were kidnapped, indicating that the abduction involved a faction of the Sinaloa cartel led by Damaso Lopez Jr., known as El Mini Lich, who is the son of Damaso Lopez Sr. In an interview, Damaso Lopez Serrano, known as El Mini Lich, shared his account of the kidnapping. He revealed that while he did not orchestrate the abduction, he knew those who planned it. He described being part of a WhatsApp group of individuals from various criminal organizations, many enemies of Los Chapitos, who expressed frustration over their actions in Sinaloa. When asked to investigate Ivan's birthday plans in Puerto Vallarta, Lopez Serrano obliged, but claimed he heard nothing further until receiving a cryptic message the following morning, informing him the Guzman brothers had been captured. Negotiations for their release then began. Lopez Serrano stated that his father, Damaso Lopez Núñez, played a key role in advocating for the release of Los Chapitos. According to him, El Mayo, another prominent Sinaloa cartel leader, had asked Lopez Núñez to leverage connections with CJN leader El Mencho to negotiate the release. Lopez Núñez believed the kidnapping might serve as a wake-up call for Los Chapitos, though Lopez Serrano expressed skepticism about this. Ultimately, Chapo himself intervened, reportedly issuing an ultimatum involving El Mencho's imprisoned son, El Menchito, to secure the release of his sons. Lopez Serrano concluded that Los Chapitos owed their survival to their father's negotiation efforts, emphasizing El Chapo's pivotal role in ensuring their safety. This incident further highlighted the deepening fractures within the Sinaloa cartel and the increasingly volatile dynamics between its factions. While Los Chapitos and El Mencho focused on securing their safety, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman also sought ways to overturn his life imprisonment sentence. Since January, the infamous drug lord has taken charge of his legal defense, despite his inability to speak or write in English. From behind bars, he petitioned for increased visits with his wife, Emma Coronel, and pushed for a retrial to challenge his conviction. "I have been extradited to the United States for more than 7 years, and to this day, I have not seen the sun," read one of the handwritten letters penned by El Chapo, written from the maximum security prison in Florence, Colorado, where he has been serving a life sentence since his 2019 conviction. In a series of handwritten letters from prison, the 67-year-old has voiced repeated grievances about his treatment by U.S. authorities, describing his confinement as torture. Frustrated by unmet requests, El Chapo dismissed his lawyers in January and began representing himself. Though he does not speak or write English, El Chapo relied on a lawyer to translate his dictated messages in his quest for better living conditions and a retrial. He criticized his former legal team, blaming their inefficiency for his imprisonment. From prison, he sent hundreds of pages of letters requesting additional time outside his cell, increased visitation rights for his wife, Emma Coronel, and their 2 daughters, as well as access to educational materials and English classes. He also carefully reviewed testimony from former associates who testified against him, distancing himself from their allegations while urging an appeals court to reopen his case. In his letters, El Chapo directly addressed Judge Brian Cogan, who sentenced him, seeking clemency and challenging the credibility of key witness Vicente Vicentilo Zambada, son of Ismael El Mayo Zambada. He alleged that the U.S. and Mexican governments inflated his image for political motives and urged authorities to judge him on his behavior rather than media narratives. El Chapo also wrote to Mexico's former president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, pleading for assistance and protesting the conditions of his confinement, which he described as cruel and inhumane. Despite his efforts, U.S. authorities remain vigilant, fearing that El Chapo could attempt another escape, given his history history of 2 successful prison breaks in Mexico. Regardless, El Chapo has been exploring legal options to return to Mexico to serve his sentence. After 8 years in a U.S. maximum security prison, a federal court granted an injunction allowing a judge to consider the possibility of his transfer. This decision followed Mexico's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, SRE, rejecting El Chapo's petition in January 2023. However, the court did not suspend the case, meaning the Mexican government was not required to reconsider his extradition or take immediate action. The trial to resolve his extradition could take over a year, and the likelihood of success remains slim. El Chapo's defense argues that he has the right to serve his sentence in Mexico under a 1977 treaty between Mexico and the U.S., which facilitates prisoner transfers for sentence execution. Amid these legal battles, strategic moves are unfolding on multiple fronts. While El Mencho and El Chapo plot their next steps, the Mexican government is concurrently working to repair its strained relationship with the U.S.-Mexico crackdown on cartels. In late February, Mexico extradited nearly 30 prominent cartel figures to the United States, marking one of the largest mass handovers in recent history. This move included both veteran and emerging leaders of the country's drug trade, such as Rafael Caro Quintero, co-founder of the Guadalajara cartel, and accused of orchestrating the 1985 murder of U.S. DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena. Quintero, who had returned to drug trafficking after his controversial release in 2013, was extradited to New York to face drug trafficking charges. Among the extradited figures was Antonio Oseguera Cervantes, the brother of El Mencho, the leader of the powerful CJNG. This cartel, along with the notorious Sinaloa cartel, has been a major force behind the fentanyl crisis in the U.S. high-ranking member Jose Angel El Garrito Canobio, tied to the Sinaloa cartel's Chapitos wing, was also among those handed over. The mass extradition occurred amidst threats from U.S. President Donald Trump to impose a 25% tariff on all Mexican goods. These threats were tied to concerns over fentanyl-related deaths and migration issues. With 80% of its exports reliant on the U.S. market, Mexico faced considerable economic vulnerability, adding urgency to its actions. The extradition underscored growing cooperation between the two nations, as U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi confirmed the defendants' custody and arraignments were scheduled for some individuals in Brooklyn federal court. This large-scale transfer signals a notable escalation in Mexico's efforts to combat organized crime and reflects the enduring challenges posed by cartels, which continue to smuggle fentanyl, cocaine, and heroin into the United States. It sent a clear message about both nations' commitment to addressing these issues collaboratively. The extradited traffickers were distributed across 8 U.S. cities, including Phoenix, Chicago, Houston, and Washington. Among them were Miguel Angel Trevino Morales, Z40, and Oscar Omar Trevino Morales, Z42, former leaders of the infamous Zetas gang. Their reputation for extreme brutality, employing methods such as dissolving enemies in acid, cemented their infamy within Mexico's criminal underworld. Captured by Mexican soldiers over a decade ago, the Trevino brothers' transfer came as a surprise, with their lawyer, Juan Manuel Delgado, revealing he had not been officially notified of their extradition. Federal prosecutors also confirmed the extradition of Daniel Franco Lopez, a high-ranking member of the Sinaloa cartel, to El Paso from Mexico. Lopez, also known as Misha, Neon, and Fair, faces charges of orchestrating murders, kidnappings, and trafficking large quantities of cocaine and marijuana into the U.S. indicted alongside Joaquin El Chapo Guzman and Sinaloa cartel co-founder Ismael El Mayo Zambada Garcia. Lopez had been in Mexican custody since his arrest on August 14, 2012. He was listed as defendant number 16 in a sweeping indictment involving over a dozen co-defendants. Days before his extradition, Lopez appeared in federal court, where prosecutors highlighted the significance of his transfer as a pivotal development in a decade-long effort to dismantle the cartel's operations. Investigators even compared the case's intricate details to the plot of a Hollywood blockbuster. "You know the film, Cartels, Guns, Drugs, Money, Feds," said Special Agent in Charge Jeffrey C. Boschek II of the ATF Dallas Field Division. Fortunately for the citizens of the United States, the good guys prevailed in this one. Mr. Lopez, an alleged underground criminal mastermind, left a path of destruction in his path. The American people are safer with this bandit in handcuffs and behind bars. Meanwhile, the fight against organized crime continued on another front. In Culiacan, Mexico, Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, the eldest son of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, orchestrated a daring escape through a tunnel during a joint army and police raid. As leader of Los Chapitos, a faction of the Sinaloa cartel, his evasion mirrored his father's notorious 2015 prison break. While Ivan managed to elude capture, authorities apprehended several of his associates linked to fentanyl trafficking, underscoring the relentless efforts to dismantle cartel networks. The U.S. government placed a $10 million bounty on Ivan, listing him among its most wanted drug traffickers. Reports suggest he is under immense pressure due to increased crackdowns on his cartel, with repeated raids leaving him in constant fear of capture. Meanwhile, Mexican forces, supported by National Guard helicopters, continued their search for Ivan in the hours following the raid, highlighting the growing pressure on Los Chapitos amid heightened anti-cartel efforts. The leaders of Los Chapitos, La Maíza, and the Jalisco cartel remain top targets for Mexican and U.S. authorities, as some continue to evade capture. The pressure is mounting on Los Chapitos, the Sinaloa cartel faction led by Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's sons. Recent operations in Culiacan resulted in the arrests of Jose Angel Canobio, alias El Garrido, and Kevin Alonso Gil, alias El 200, both trusted lieutenants of Ivan Archivaldo Guzman, one of El Chapo's sons. These arrests brought the total number of high-profile captures within the faction to at least 51 since September, according to official reports. Additional raids in Rosario, Mazatlan, and Culiacan led to 5 more arrests and the seizure of weapons and drugs, leaving Los Chapitos severely weakened. Ivan Archivaldo and his brother Jesus Alfredo remain the only 2 of El Chapo's sons still at large, with most of their lieutenants either arrested or killed in recent months. These developments bolstered President Claudia Sheinbaum's stance against U.S. pressure, as President Donald Trump prioritized combating fentanyl trafficking and migration. In response to the U.S. designation of 6 Mexican criminal groups as terrorist organizations, Sheinbaum introduced a constitutional amendment to impose stricter penalties on unauthorized foreign agents operating in Mexico. Among the arrests, Canobio stood out due to his role as Ivan Archivaldo's financial operator, overseeing drug trafficking routes, distribution networks, and illicit proceeds. He also allegedly participated in the violent Culiacanazos of 2019 and 2023, which aimed to prevent the capture of Ovidio Guzman Lopez, another of El Chapo's sons. With their leadership structure in disarray, Los Chapitos faced mounting challenges as authorities continued their crackdown on the cartel's operations. Sheinbaum's recent actions came as a surprise, given her earlier opposition to Trump's approach to combating drug cartels. In early February, shortly after Trump's inauguration, President Claudia Sheinbaum addressed the issue of drug trafficking cartels. The U.S. Department of Justice had called for expedited judicial proceedings against drug lords and the complete dismantling of these criminal organizations. While both nations shared a common goal, tensions arose over the implications of U.S. agencies and security forces potentially operating on Mexican soil. This sparked a new bilateral crisis, prompting Sheinbaum to voice her concerns during a morning press conference. Let them start with their country. Don't you have cartels there? Don't they have organized crime there? They have a lot to do in the United States, the Mexican president said. So what changed? A statement from the Mexican Attorney General's office said, "This action is part of the efforts of coordination, cooperation, and bilateral reciprocity within the framework of respect for the sovereignty of both nations." The sweeping actions caught many off guard, except for President Trump, the driving force behind the crackdown. His unwavering focus on dismantling cartels has been a central pillar of his agenda. Trump's plans. Donald Trump's plans to combat Mexican drug cartels began long before his presidency. Reports revealed that he privately considered deploying covert U.S. assassination squads to Mexico to target cartel leaders if re-elected. The plan involved creating a kill list of top cartel figures and using special forces, cyber warfare, and other tactics to dismantle cartel operations without Mexico's consent. Trump reportedly emphasized that the U.S. military had tougher killers than the cartels and proposed an action plan to destroy cartel leadership and infrastructure. His campaign website declared that his administration would establish an official U.S. policy to dismantle drug cartels in the same manner as the fight against ISIS. Trump also spoke about his agenda item in a campaign video. Either we will get the full cooperation of other governments to stop this menace, or we will expose every bribe, every kickback, every payoff, and every bit of corruption that is allowing the cartels to preserve their brutal reign. That wasn't the first time Trump discussed such measures. In 2017, he told then Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto that he might send U.S. troops to stop bad hombres. In 2020, he asked Defense Secretary Mark Esper about launching missiles into Mexico to destroy drug labs while keeping U.S. involvement secret. These ideas reflected his long-standing hardline stance on cartels and immigration, which he continued to emphasize during his 2024 campaign. Upon taking office in January 2025, President Trump formally designated 8 Latin American crime organizations as foreign terrorist organizations, intensifying pressure on cartels operating in the U.S. and their collaborators. This move, based on a January 20th executive order, included groups like Trendy Aragua in Venezuela, Mississippi, 13 in El Salvador, and 6 Mexican cartels. The designation, typically reserved for politically motivated groups like Al-Qaeda, was justified by the administration due to the cartel's international operations, including drug trafficking, migrant smuggling, and violent territorial expansion. This move was part of his broader strategy to combat the flow of drugs and illegal migration across the southern border. The order identified cartels as a unique national security threat, citing their campaign of violence and terror throughout the Western Hemisphere, which has led to an influx of drugs, violent criminals, and gangs into the U.S. The order also highlighted 2 transnational gangs from Central America as threats and declared its U.S. policy to eliminate these organizations' presence entirely. It instructed the State Department to decide within 14 days whether to officially label the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. While similar proposals were considered during Trump's first term in the Obama administration, they were never fully implemented. Critics argued that the designation was overly broad and could harm U.S.-Latin American relations, disrupt trade, and create legal risks for businesses inadvertently linked to cartel activities. Cartels, deeply embedded in Mexico's economy, extend their influence beyond drugs and smuggling to industries like the lucrative avocado trade. Aid groups also warned that such designations in the past had disrupted food imports, as shipping companies feared potential U.S. prosecution for indirect connections to targeted groups. Before the designations were made public, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum stated that Mexico would not accept any decree involving extraterritorial actions within its borders. However, she expressed support for advancing joint investigations with the U.S. to address shared concerns. If they make this decree to investigate even more in the United States, the money laundering and the criminal groups that operate in the United States, that carry out those drug sales, it's very good, Sheinbaum said. What we do not accept is the violation of our sovereignty. As President Donald Trump designated Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, reporters questioned whether he would consider deploying U.S. Special Operations Forces to Mexico. Could happen, the president said, noting that stranger things have happened. Experts on cartels and warfare warned that deploying U.S. military troops to Mexico risked causing instability, which could spill over into U.S. territory. A senior active-duty special operator, speaking anonymously to Business Insider, stated that the American public would likely not support the potential fallout from such actions. He argued that sending military forces to target cartel leaders would not solve the issue and would likely make it worse. While Trump had proposed military intervention in Mexico during his first term, his team appeared to have considered the idea more seriously this time. Trump's national security advisor Mike Waltz, a former Green Beret, advocated for the use of special operations forces, an idea echoed by border czar Tom Homan, who suggested such forces could take the cartels off the face of the earth. However, experts warned that direct action raids on Mexican soil, especially without Mexico's consent, could lead to disastrous consequences. Instead, they highlighted less aggressive approaches, such as training foreign troops or enhancing internal defense capabilities, as more effective and sustainable solutions. These missions, long associated with units like the Army's Green Berets, could complement broader government efforts to curb drug trafficking. With Trump's formal designation of cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, such strategies gained renewed attention. Donald Trump also ordered an additional 3,000 active-duty troops to the U.S.-Mexico border to intensify efforts against illegal immigration and fulfill a key campaign promise. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth directed elements of a Stryker Brigade combat team and a General Support Aviation Battalion for the mission, with the Pentagon confirming their arrival along the nearly 2,000-mile border in the following weeks. Officials estimated the deployment at approximately 3,000 troops. This addition brought the total number of U.S. troops at the southern border to around 9,200, including 4,200 under federal orders and 5,000 National Guards under state control. The Pentagon stated that the new forces would strengthen border security operations to safeguard U.S. territorial integrity. Trump aimed to expand the military's role in addressing migration, drug trafficking, and transnational crime, continuing a practice of deploying military personnel to the border that had been in place since the 1990s. As part of President Donald Trump's initiative to curb drug trafficking across the Mexico-U.S. border, the CIA and U.S. Special Forces launched operations in Mexico to gather intelligence and strengthen border security. On February 12, 2025, the Mexican Senate's Naval Ministry Commission approved the deployment of 10 U.S. Army personnel to Mexico. Beginning February 17th and continuing through March 30th, their mission focused on training the Mexican Navy's Marine infantry in both conventional and unconventional warfare tactics at the Luis Carpizo Naval Facility in Campeche. The CIA increased unarmed drone flights over Mexico to identify fentanyl labs, with plans to share gathered intelligence with Mexican authorities. Additionally, 11 Green Berets from the Army's 7th Special Forces Group entered Mexico to train naval infantry Marines on combating drug flow into the U.S. and preventing illegal firearms from crossing into Mexico. These training efforts were conducted at the request of Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum, who emphasized that Mexico would coordinate without subordinating during the operations. Straight Arrow News noted that the Green Berets had a history of participating in operations in Panama, Peru, and Ecuador, as well as previous training missions with Mexican forces. The New York Times reported that CIA drone flights over Mexico began during the Biden administration and were later intensified under Trump. Meanwhile, the Daily Wire highlighted that Trump deployed these forces to address what it described as an unprecedented influx of illegal immigrants and drugs during the Biden administration. In Culiacan, the capital of Mexico's Sinaloa state, residents face daily violence as two factions of the Sinaloa cartel battle for dominance. Once considered a safe haven under cartel control, the city has become a war zone since September, following the arrest of cartel leader Ismael El Mayo Zambada and his rival, a son of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. The power struggle shattered an unwritten rule to avoid harming civilians, leading to carjackings, kidnappings, and over 900 killings. Families live in fear, with parents checking for shootouts before sending children to school and imposing strict safety protocols. Disappearances are common, with many families searching for loved ones through social media or collective efforts. The violence has disrupted daily life, from limited burial hours to children reacting to loud noises with panic. The situation shifted after Donald Trump's election and his pressure on Mexico to combat cartels. New President Claudia Sheinbaum adopted a more aggressive approach, increasing security operations and arrests in Sinaloa. In February alone, authorities dismantled 113 synthetic drug labs and removed over 400 cartel surveillance cameras. While these actions have weakened the cartels, experts warn that sustained efforts are needed to dismantle them completely. Some residents, despite the hardships, express gratitude for the intensified crackdown, hoping it will bring lasting change. Early this month, U.S. President Donald Trump pledged to wage war on Mexico's drug cartels, accusing them of committing rape and murder and labeling them a significant threat to national security. The cartels are waging war on America, and it's time for America to wage war on the cartels, which we are doing, he addressed the Congress. Trump's declaration of war on Mexican cartels quickly turned into action. Just days after his statement, Ruben Oseguera Gonzalez, known as El Menchito, was sentenced to life in prison by a federal judge in Washington, D.C. This marked one of the first major drug war trials since the Trump administration labeled certain Mexican cartels as terrorist organizations. Oseguera Gonzalez, the U.S.-born son of El Mencho and Mexico's most wanted man, was convicted in September of trafficking cocaine and meth and possessing weapons to support his drug operations. This marks a significant setback for El Mencho, leaving the world closely observing what unfolds next. Thanks for watching. If you found this video informative and interesting, be sure to check out other similar and amazing videos on the screen. See you in the next video.